What I'm going to talk about today will almost sound like a scary fiction novel, full of complicated plots, subterfuge, and hidden technology, almost like a Mission Impossible story. Unfortunately, everything I will talk about is real, though it seems outwardly and impossible. But yet we have let it come to this because we ignore the sign. I'm going to talk about the happy you doing your normal stuff in social media with your favorite phone, and then what's really happening with the technologies around you. Then I'll insert different other characters in this saga that are involved with your lives via our tech devices, the puppet masters. The world has changed, my friends. It is no longer as it seems, though my audience is likely more protected than others from this. Unfortunately, the world revolves around the majority who happen to be NPCs. An NPC in gaming is a non-playable character, a character that does not have control, a character played by the machine. What a way to start 2023, huh? With a crazy story about you, the technologies, and players that wield them, which include big tech billionaires, the US intelligence agencies, and even clandestine embedded foreign agents. Stay right there to find out if you're just an NPC. Let's start first with you. I mean a generic you, the average person on the street. Likely this does not describe my usual audience, but it will be someone you know. You are happy with your gadgets. You enjoy Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. You don't really care about privacy because you have nothing to hide. You carry around an iPhone or some Google Android, or what I refer to as a normie phone. You also likely use an Amazon Alexa Echo in your house. You don't see any dangers associated with any of this. Or maybe you don't know there could be some dangers, but you have nothing to hide, so it doesn't matter. You go on social media and openly express your opinions. You're in a free country after all. You are aware of issues of the world as it is presented to you by your political party. And depending on which political party that is, you likely have a predetermined list of issues that may have changed over the years, but you don't really care since you believe in your leaders. You may be aware that everyone is extremely polarized lately, and likely you will categorize other people who believe in something different as some sort of extremist, because that's what your leaders tell you. You also do not question what is stated to you by your leaders. After all, they're not going to lie to you. You're probably sensing an increased tension around you and the world in general because of this extreme polarization of views. But you don't really work out the inner workings of this issue, and your life goes on, oblivious to what is triggering all this. If this describes you, then you are an NPC. The technologies. What you didn't know, of course, is what is in the everyday technologies that you use, like your phones, your Amazon Echo, and your social media platforms. You didn't know that your entire internet experience is completely tracked and manipulated. In a subtle way, the main tracking mechanism is something as simple as the Google ID. That is one of the many tracking methods. Did you not consciously consider that the Google ID is attached to every action and every click, and that Google has attached this Google ID to every phone, every Google platform like YouTube or Google Search, and every website that supports Google Ads or has Google Analytics? This means that your every search, every click on every website, every interaction on the phone is known. Then you fail to remember that Gmail is also read by Google. Your Google Docs and Google Photos are equally scanned and categorized. You also likely didn't even know that your phone has some fixed identifiers like an IMEI and an advertising ID to make sure that your phone is certified to be you at all times. And of course, no one leaves home without the phone being a reach away. The phone too has some pretty advanced tricks. For example, it can actually acquire and record your location at all times, and there really isn't an offered way to turn it off, especially since there are multiple mechanisms to spot your location, depending on the OS. This is a total capture of all your thoughts and ideas. Then Apple decided to up the ante in surveillance. Now iPhones talk to each other and pass info on each other's locations, independent of the internet. In fact, commands from Apple HQ could be sent to phones wirelessly and without cell service using the Apple Mesh network. This even works when the phone is powered off. Crazy concept, but it's actually being done. The phone, when off, becomes an AirTag. But Apple's technologies go way beyond Google's. While Google and Facebook are focused on tracking your historical behaviors, Apple can sense the environment around you right now. They built a feature called client-side scanning, which can instruct the AI of the phone to look for particular content. This content could be photos, but really is not limited to that. What could it scan for? Well, this is the part that seems so futuristic. Neural networks, or AI capability, is built into the new iPhones and new Google Pixels. The AI can be offloaded to the phone now. This means that all Apple needs to do, for example, is define an environment to observe, and the AI can observe that the environment contains the necessary characteristics and report it to HQ. While currently this announced technology applies only to stored photos on the phone, the AI could, in effect, use the camera as a sensor to observe this environment. There's no particular difference to an AI if the source of the image is the camera or a photo. Why did they build this? Though I have suspicions I will raise later, the point is that the AI allows very fast scanning of all content in all phones without any human involved. It could search billions of phones in an instant. The technological excuse for using this technique instead of just spying on your phone directly is that no human actually has to examine your phones for your nude pics, for example. That, in theory, could remain private. At least until the AI targets you and then reports your Apple ID to Apple, and then a next layer of surveillance can begin. Truly mind-boggling what this can be used for. There is equally a complex infrastructure built on voice surveillance. Using Siri, Alexa Echo, and Google Assistant, your voices are captured in your home and recorded and filed away for potential future perusal. I can't even tell you all the surveillance technologies without spending hours in a video, but I'm just giving you some pretty hairy highlights of the surveillance infrastructure existing today. Big tech. I've set the stage that the current technologies you use every day all have powerful surveillance features built in. Now let's talk about how big tech is utilizing this in ways you never even understood before. Clearly, big tech companies have activist objectives. The book Google Leaks, a whistleblower's expose of big tech censorship, shows the deep bias within the Google organization starting at the top. The recent spate of Twitter Files releases shows a clear agenda of people in leadership at Twitter actively promoting one side of the political spectrum, specifically even influencing the results of an election with censorship and modulating of the visibility of opposing content. This should offer you a clue. There's some political agenda at where this is of serious concern is on the Google front. I'm sure Facebook has something equivalent to this, but at least I have a clear evidence of this on the Google side. As I already mentioned earlier, your every action on the internet is tracked and recorded by Google if you do not take sufficient steps to prevent it. Everything you do is associated to your Google ID, and this is matched to your specific phone. What this allows Google to do is to figure out your political position, for example, on a chart like this. This is just an example and relates to your political posture. There are similar behavioral classifications that pertain, for example, to your financial status, health, purchase habits, activities, sexual interests, and other hobbies, and so on. This type of classification of every user is called the Federated Learning of Cohorts by Google, which, as implied by the label, means that Google is focused on learning your cohort, or to simplify, you are grouped into cohort classifications. This is not a benign classification for advertising. Perhaps you don't comprehend the reach of Google. Google can actually control the content you see. Just like shadow banning and censorship was done on Twitter and revealed by the Twitter Files expose, Google actually has activist organizations created for the purpose of influencing the population. Twitter was already used to change the messaging seen by the masses. Google has a more targeted method of influencing. Influencing is a nice term. The real impact is more about manipulating the population and maybe even brainwashing. The early Google projects involved attempting to influence young Muslims in London to move away from extremist ideas. Now it is being used to suppress dissent on vax issues, suppress opposition to extreme woke ideologies, suppress debate on biological sex and its impact on everyday life, amplify messaging on climate change extremism, amplify messaging on overpopulation, and so on. Understand what I'm saying here. What is being suppressed is debate, and then what is being amplified is whatever agenda Google supports. And an opposition side is labeled as an extremist viewpoint or conspiracy theory. And most people will accept this and are shifting the lines of truth from the middle to some more extreme positioning. Google does this in various ways. For example, they suppress certain content from appearing in Google Search or YouTube. They know who to target because they know everything about each one of you. No, there's no human being watching you daily. This is all done by an AI presented with objectives. The danger of this is that people are so classified in cohorts that they don't even realize that a particular cohort can be identified in any given street, even house by house, since Google IDs can be mapped to an exact location. This is a widespread and dangerous concern because none of us truly know big tech's real agenda. We can see some of it as being tied to politics, but we don't really know. But in general, this is what they can do: push an argument and then stifle debate. Three-letter agencies. Then there is the U.S. intelligence community, or the IC as they call themselves. I say three letters, but they're affiliated with the four-letter agencies of the Five Eye countries, so don't assume I'm limiting this to the USA. There are, of course, equivalent organizations in China and Russia, and they have their own equivalent big tech organizations that they control, but I will focus on the USA since what I'm going to tell you is now pretty well documented. I'll be using my favorite substitute terms for some of these institutions, and this is not meant to be disparaging, but just a way to obfuscate content to the AI algorithms. Though Edward Snowden revealed the big picture of mass surveillance conducted by the No Such Agency and the Zucking IA, new information from Elon Musk's release of the Twitter Files is pretty damning. This is because some very specific actions are recorded in Twitter employee conversations on their internal communications. For example, the Zucking BI had weekly meetings with the top leadership in the original Twitter, and they specifically provided a list of people to suppress on the platform. We even know the specific people that appear in these lists. This is actually not new, and I was aware of the presence of these operatives in social media. I've had private conversations with some of them, and mostly I was aware of their actions related to looking for child-attracted criminals. So it has always been clear to me that federal agents were and are deeply embedded in social media. But I did not know how deep the involvement of these three-letter agencies were in suppressing even free speech in a country that's supposed to be a free country and on topics that would be commonly debated in real life. This technique of modulating the volume of content via surreptitious means like shadow banning and de-amplification of content is definitely a form of state control that is subtle. However, no matter how this is presented, this clearly indicates that our own intelligence community is actively doing things to suppress actual free speech. The problem with this intentional modulation of content is that the effect is to artificially influence elections. That is not right. It is even more disturbing that these are unelected people with power controlling speech and basing their actions on their personal preferences. The average person, as a viewer of the content, can only react to what they can see. They cannot react to what they cannot see. At the moment, it would seem like the only large platform today that may no longer be under the influence of three-letter agencies is Twitter. So if you want to see an open debate, that is the only place I can recommend. You can look for me there and follow me, Rob Braxman Tech. It's important to see the debate so you can be protected from the controlled content that is now obviously seen in mainstream media. See both sides. That's all I expect. Free debate. This infiltration of government into the messaging seen by the population is not new, of course, because government has always tried to brainwash a population. Recall the Voice of America broadcasts in communist countries. This government-controlled messaging is still done against other countries and are done in sync with big tech. This was also revealed in the Twitter Files expose. The military contracted with Twitter to manipulate information to targeted populations. The sad news here is that in many cases, the targeted populations include us, citizens of the supposedly free USA. Now, the control of the three-letter agencies cannot be underestimated. The Twitter Files have shown that state agencies pay big tech for access, just like the US military paid for access to Twitter, and the Zucking BI paid for access to Twitter. It comes to reason that they paid for access to Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook as well. There are scary elements here because mass surveillance is built into the technology now. I told you earlier about Apple's ability to scan 1 billion phones quickly, within seconds, when it's searching for particular content. Think of this use. Some state player is looking for what they can classify as subversive content, and then Apple is paid to find that content without individually examining phones. Let there be no doubt this capability exists. But it goes even beyond this. A large percentage of the population have voice activation devices in their homes with Amazon Alexa Echo. Amazon is one of the largest government contractors there is. Could the intelligence community be paying for access to listen in or find specific conversations? The CALEA Law, Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act, is already implemented with specific architectures to monitor phone and texting traffic, and this is already collected in the Zucking BI's DCIS database. And this access is no more difficult than an operative going to a website to monitor anyone's phone traffic. Now there are databases of all your internet activity, including a way to geofence people, meaning having the ability to determine who was at a certain location at which time. Whose side is the IC on? Clandestine players. Now let me add a new wild card here. While operatives of law enforcement agencies work openly to censor and subvert the information we see, some other agencies work in a more clandestine way, embedded directly in big tech. Clandestine operatives may be operating at the behest of their home country, like the USA, but it is entirely possible as well for foreign entities to embed operatives in the same big tech institutions. And this is not limited to your typical big tech like Google, Apple, and Facebook. Here we have to include the hardware manufacturers. The biggest ones that have ties to the surveillance infrastructure are the two companies that make the cell baseband modems. These two companies are Qualcomm in the USA and MediaTek in Taiwan. These two companies are responsible for all the cell radio contraptions in every single phone, in which we know now have built-in backdoors that allow interception, like the state-sponsored SimJacker attack or the Pegasus hack, or hacks by other Israeli firms like Quadream and Cellebrite. How in the heck did these firms figure out how to get into this hardware? Chances are they have embedded operators. This is something that John McAfee was concerned about and even talked about on Twitter just a short time before he died. The possibility of planted programmers and planted operatives within these tech organizations, plants that can access the databases of these organizations, plants that can insert backdoors into software and hardware, plants that can turn these surveillance technologies into something even more dangerous, plants that can give access to the intelligence communities of even other countries. You already see it happening with the Pegasus attack being used by Middle East countries against journalists. What I'm saying here is that the technologies can be used against us by a myriad of players, including clandestine players, puppet masters. While I lay out an infrastructure for surveillance in this new world that's scary as heck, I don't know who's pulling the strings. I don't know if big tech is actively colluding with some deep state leaders with a specific plan, or they are just randomly trying to control us in drips and drabs. There are moves that seem completely coordinated, like Apple's insertion of AI technology in phones that completely exceed any expected normal consumer application, or the enabling of the mesh networks using Amazon Sidewalk or the Apple Mesh Network that allow for encrypted conversations on battery-powered devices without an internet. Is this just random technological advancement, or did someone plan this out? Also, I don't know how far foreign countries have fingers into this morass with clandestine operatives. Let me lay out some other observations that many of you don't know. Google itself was founded by seed money from the intelligence community. In fact, the guy that invented Google Street View was from the Zucking IA. This same person created Pokemon Go, which was an interesting way to map the interior of homes. All these big tech organizations are contractors to the government and deeply connected to the surveillance infrastructure. All the phone carriers are equally connected at the hip. Some can make a movie with all these details and come up with some scary world domination plot. The problem is that all the things that I'm saying here are actually happening. Edward Snowden's revelations of mass surveillance in 2013 were apparently just a starting point. Does someone or a small group of someones have a bigger picture and are just executing a plan? So are you still one of those people who are thinking you have nothing to hide? Or is this opening your eyes and making you see that you do not want to be an NPC? Folks, as I said earlier, I believe my particular audience is not made up of NPCs or sheep. Likely you are some of the few that are protected from disinformation and control by these powerful institutions. And the reason you are protected is because you want to use phones that are invisible to big tech, the Google phones or my own Brax 2 phone. You know to hide your IP address from third parties using a VPN, like our VPN product, Bytes VPN. You free yourself from Google spying on your emails because you know to use a paid metadata-free email service like Braxmail instead of Gmail. These are products available on the store in my social media app BraxMe. Join us there and you will see the store on it. These products support this channel and allows us to spread the message. The link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching and Happy New Year, since this is my first video of 2023.